الله أكبر الله أكبر.
A person cannot be successful without getting rid of greed in one's heart. Greed is a destructive disease. It truly is. Abdurrahman ibn Auf radiyallahu anh was performing tawaf around the Kaaba. One of the tabi'een says that I was once performing tawaf around the Kaaba, and I heard someone constantly repeating one dua. Allahumma qini shuhha nafsi, Allahumma qini shuhha nafsi. Oh Allah, protect me from the greed of my soul. Oh Allah, protect me from the greed of my soul. So when I went closer, the person constantly repeating this dua in this blessed place was none other than the companion of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Abdurrahman ibn Auf radiyallahu anhu. So I said to him, "Oh Abdurrahman ibn Auf, I hear you repeat only one dua constantly. Allahumma qini shuhha nafsi, oh Allah, protect me from the greed of my soul." So Abdurrahman ibn Auf radiyallahu anhu said, "Yes, indeed." He said, "The reason is that if Allah protects me from the greed of my soul, then I will not commit this sin and that sin and this sin and that sin." And he listed a number of sins. And thus the message is that greed leads us to committing so many sins. In fact, in a hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said that openly, "Iyyakum wash-shuh," then beware of greed. And then from a number of hadith we learn that greed destroyed the nations of before. Greed leads to bloodshed. Greed leads to misappropriation of wealth. Greed leads to theft. Greed leads to deceit, lying, cheating. Greed leads to deception, to depriving other people of wealth, to unlawfully taking other people's wealth. Greed leads to all of these things and much more. In fact, in the hadith, Prophet ﷺ categorically mentioned that greed ultimately led them to murder and to shedding blood. So, greed is one of those diseases which is the impetus, the root, cause of many ills and many sins and many crimes. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, whoever is protected from the greed of his soul, these are the ones who are successful. That's the root, that's the beginning. Before a person becomes charitable and spends willingly and happily in the way of Allah, a person has to get rid of the greed in their hearts. Without getting rid of that greed, a person cannot attain true success. Greed is despicable, it's very lowly. It causes a person to behave in the strangest of ways. In fact, greed causes a person to behave like animals, even though animals don't have greed. An animal is not greedy. It eats as much as it needs. Once it's consumed what it requires, the animal displays no further greed. It takes, yes, it doesn't have that higher intelligence, so it takes what it wants, as and when it requires, and as and when it wants it. But without greed, only out of necessity. But humans, they are unique in the sense that they have this greed in them, to the extent that the Prophet ﷺ said, as Imam Bukhari and others relate from Abdullah ibn Zubayr and other Sahaba radiyallahu anhum, that the Prophet ﷺ said, لو أن ابن آدم أعطي واديا ملأ من ذهب لا أحب إليه ثانيا ولو أعطي ثانيا لا أحب إليه ثالثا. وَلَا يَسُدُّ جَوْفَ ابْنِ آدَمَ إِلَّا التُّرَابُ وَيَتُوبُ اللَّهُ عَلَى مَنْ تَابَ. That if man was given a valley filled with gold, he would still desire a second. If he was given a second, he would still desire a third. And nothing will fill the cavity and the void and the hole in man except the soil of the earth. And Allah turns in relenting to whomever He wishes.